Hey everybody, it's Dave Duford from Final Expense Agent Mentor at feagentmentor.com. Today we're going to talk about a little case study I have with an agent of mine and kind of going through some of the realities of this business and to give you some perspective on what I look for inside of my agents' experiences and circumstances to figure out if they need what they need help with. So, talked to an agent last night. He's been doing this business for a while, but has had kind of some issues. And the purpose of our conversation is to figure out what the deal was and what I could do to help him solve the problems that he has. Because the reality of Final Expense, and really the reality of any sales endeavor, is we all have ups or downs, and the person we look at in the mirror is our own worst enemy. Sometimes we start to think bad thoughts, and those thoughts, inception-wise, get inside of our head and can lead us and poison us away from something we're really doing really well at, but we don't have anybody to talk about it with it and work through the problems. So that's where a good manager comes in, especially one with experience that you can relate to you in a real sense. And so that's what we tried to do in talking to this agent. So let me kind of give you the story here. So I talked to him last night. Think he's not doing very well in the business as of the last couple of weeks. Just dealing with deadbeats, losers. When he sold a policy, it's very low in case or face amount. And so he's worried that what's going on? You know, am I doing anything wrong? He just doesn't feel right about the whole process. So when I talk to an agent like this, you know, we have a perception of reality, but we always want to take the perception and compare it to something that is actually real, okay? A standard, a basis, a litmus test, okay? So the first thing I ask, of course, is how you feeling? What's the situation? Open-ended. I want to hear my agents talk about what their perceived problem is and not judge. And so once I kind of understood, and again, I've already relayed it to you in the video, the next three questions I ask are this. How long have you been doing this business? How many leads have you purchased? And then how many of those have you closed? This gives me a rough estimate about putting a time frame on his activity, how much business he's done to see if it compares to being a good agent, bad agent, or a great agent, and to see if there's any room for improvement based off of those closing percentages. So here's what this agent told me. He's been in business for 10 weeks, okay? Now I'll come back to this because it's very important. He's bought a total of 117 leads, okay? Okay, nothing yet we can determine from this quite yet. And then lastly, how much has he closed? He's closed 30 cases off of 117 leads. So now we've got a metric, a ratio, that we can look to kind of compare to see how things are working. So when I talk to agents, you know, for me, I want my agents to be closing or have a goal of closing 25% of their leads. So if an agent buys 20 leads a week, I want the goal to be to close 5 applications a week. The face amounts, the premium sizes will always vary. Over the long run, most people have a 40 to 50, somewhere in there, case size average. And so, you know, the numbers work itself out over the long run. But the important thing is, work your leads, try to get a 25% closing ratio over the longer haul. Some weeks are better than others, of course. So right there, I knew the guy's right on target. He's closing 1 out of 4 of his leads. That's perfect. You can be an awesome, financially successful agent with a 25% closing ratio. You don't need to close all your leads. You don't even need to close half of them, not even 30%. 25% is fantastic. And so he's hitting his metric, and he had enough time in there that he had experienced a large enough sample size and enough time to work those leads that he's been doing really well. So what's the problem? You know, he's doing great. And the problem is he doesn't have anything to compare that to, which was part of the reason we did the comparison. You know, when you listen to an agent that does a ton more leads, a ton more activity, and sells a whole lot more insurance than you, it can be depressing. But what you have to compare it to is the ratios. You know, if a guy buys 50 leads a week and sells 10 applications versus the guy who buys 20 leads a week, and sells 5 applications. Yeah, the guy who's doing 10 apps a week looks like he's a hardcore closer, but his closing ratio is lower. If you do the math, 10 to 50 is 20%, 5 to 20 is 25%. So in a sense, the guy who's doing 5 out of 20 is a little bit more closing related skilled. All right. So, but I haven't really gotten to the main problem here, and this is the whole point of this video, is that final expense is like baseball. Okay, you know, the guys who get in the Hall of Fame have batting averages above 300. That's considered Hall of Fame material, right? That means they miss 70% of the time, or they don't hit 70% of the time. That's a huge ratio. So we're talking 7 out of 10 hits, but they're still Hall of Fame material, and that's what you have to look at. Is that final expense is the same way. You can have 3 out of 4 year leads curse you out, kick you out of the door, tell you to eat crap and die, but that 25% that buy is all that really matters. You know, who cares about the guys who reject you? If you hit that 25% ratio, it all works out great. And so the problem, though, to hit that metric consistently with a large enough profitability margin that you're doing really well, you've got to have more at-bats, which references that baseball reference. You know, the guys that hit a 300 average, they don't bat 10 times a year. All right, they bat hundreds of times a year, and they do it over a 10-year span of time or a 20-year span of time. And the point is they have a lot of at-bats, just like the final expense agent should do. This is where this agent wasn't doing good. If you look at the numbers again, I mentioned in the beginning, he did 117 leads, but he's been doing 117 leads over 10 weeks. So that averages out barely to 12 leads a week. Okay? He's closing 3 cases at 12, but he's not seeing a lot of people. Okay? And so that's the problem, is that what he needs to do is double his lead flow. He needs to go from 10, 11, 12 to 20 to 25. If he can keep his metrics the same, he's going to double his income. And he's going to do a lot better than what he's doing right now, financially speaking, because he's got everything else lined up just like it needs to be. He just needs to execute more and get in front of more people. That's the best problem to have in this business. When you have talent, you have the hard work, but you just need to see more people. Okay, that's a solvable problem when you work with an organization that can get you more leads. But the reason I went over this with this agent is sometimes we need somebody to identify, a third-person party, to identify the facts. Because it's important to be reminded of what the reality is, that your skill level is good, that your closing ratio is sufficient, it's very good, that you're just, the only thing that you're having a problem with is you're not seeing enough people. And that's the biggest problem in this business. And it's also the biggest reason why agents fail, is they just don't see enough people. They don't get enough times at bat. And so that's why I took the time with this agent to clarify this, because he didn't quite see that. He just saw the last 2 weeks were a bunch of deadbeats, but he only worked like 20 leads. And so that's why it's so important to know what your numbers are, because we all get discouraged. I still work in the field. I am no different than any other agent. You know, we start thinking different even if we've been doing this a long time and get negative. But it's important to know your numbers, to keep track of them, even if it's just surface level. It doesn't have to be uber detailed, but just a basic tracking of your numbers can let you know in a litmus test way how you're doing. And it keeps you focused. It keeps you level-headed. Because if you just have a bad week, but the last 3 weeks you close 10,000 each week, who cares? You're doing pretty well, especially if your average case size or average week is 5,000 in premium. So again, I do this video because it's important. This business has highs, it has lows. And to get through the lows, you have to work through the lows. Every agent has lows. Sometimes the lows take out agents, but you can't let that do that. And part of the process is routinely analyzing your numbers to make sure you're doing everything to stay on track. And if you're not, what kind of solutions can you execute on to improve your situation? Because sales is performance-based. It's about people seeing people. It's about leads, but it's also about selling well, interviewing well, pre-qualifying well, and asking for the business, and always asking for the business once you know and have pre-qualified them. So I hope this video kind of gives you some explanation, kind of on a real basis, of how to stay motivated in the business, how to get through the lows, and how how to identify things that need to be fixed. So again, this is David Duford from Final Expense Agent Mentor at feagentmentor.com. Check my website out if you want more information about the program and how it works. And go to the contact page, fill a form out, shoot it to me, and we'll talk sometime. Again, Dave Duford, thanks for listening. Take care.